Welcome to the Sellernomics Podcast, where we share valuable tips and information in the Amazon and e-commerce space. Each week, we deliver the best interviews with some of the top Amazon personalities in the industry to help you grow your business. Today's episode is brought to you by GETIDA, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at getida.com/Sellernomics. And now, here are your hosts, Rob Stanley and Lisa Kinski.
Hey everyone, welcome to another great episode of Sellernomics. I'm Rob Stanley. And of course, my amazing host, Lisa Kinski, is here with me. We have a great one for you guys today. Sourcing. Everybody pretty much sources from China. It seems to be the go-to place, at least when you're getting started, or even as you're continuing to grow your Amazon business. And today we're going to be talking about the ultimate formula for navigating Amazon and sourcing. So I missed that one little extra part there. So we'll definitely be talking a lot about sourcing and coming from China. And today's guest is going to be Brendan with AtoZ Formula. Let's bring him into the studio. Hey, Brendan.
Hey, it's good to be here with Lisa.
Yeah, sorry. So the intro was supposed to say the ultimate guide to sourcing safely and profitably. So I messed that up. That's all right. We're still talking about sourcing. There's great information there. Brendan, when people are getting started, like the first place a lot of sellers go is Alibaba, or they start trying to figure out how to source from China. Let's start off with, what do you usually recommend when somebody's just getting started learning about sourcing from China? What is kind of like the first bits of information you give them to start that process?
Yeah, look, again, Alibaba is really, there are lots of different places you can go. And I could list many of them for you. Others would be, global sources, GETIDA, but Alibaba's, really got everything you need. So you don't need to go to all the others. So that would be the place to go. You need to figure out what you want, what the product is, its specifications, and the quantity that you're after for your initial order. So once you've got those, then that's usually enough to just, get your hands a bit wet, a bit dirty, and get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to kind of finding a category or a product that they're looking to source, is it something that you recommend they do a lot of research on, or should they maybe just be looking at what's available to them? Kind of what strategy do you usually take at that approach?
Look, there are many ways to do this. One way is simply to have a look at what people are searching for on Amazon that aren't being fulfilled, right? So you might get a lot of people looking for like the Salvador Dali melting clock, right? So you could like a Dali melting clock, and you might go on Amazon and you go, oh, there's not many people selling melting clocks here, so it's crap. It's not a good thing. There's no market here. There's no demand. But then if you actually look at how many people searching for it, you might see there's a huge number of people searching for it and not fulfilling it. So where there's a demand in terms of keyword search and minimum people fulfilling it, or people fulfilling it that aren't doing a good job, their photos are not so good. Their keywords aren't so good. The listing's not so good. Maybe their FBMing is FBAing. If there's not really much competition, then that's the same thing. So that would be one way. That would be kind of the safest way to do it. And another way to do it might be, for example, just going through and seeing a product that has a huge amount of demand online right now. Like a lot of people actually selling it, but they're not getting a lot of reviews, or they're not enough reviews in that category, and there's a huge amount of demand that's not being fulfilled that way. So that'd be two different ways to do it. There's also arbitrage, where you might find, like Rob, we were in Mexico together. Was that correct? Did you come to the Mexico show? Yeah. Correct. So we're in Mexico, and what happens is that there's a lot of people now moving from China to Mexico for sourcing. Not necessarily because Mexico is cheaper. It's pretty much the same. If anything, Mexico might be 10-15% cheaper. But once you count the logistics of a truck being able to go directly from Mexico City to Texas or whatever, to Austin or Dallas, whatever, versus Shanghai on a boat, then what you end up happening is you end up getting 30% prices, 30% less overall, because the shipping is a big component, and you can get your products there in a week instead of 40 days. So that means that your cash flow is preserved because you don't have all your money locked up on a huge amount of things. You can re-up faster. So another strategy might just be find a product that people are importing out of China and do it from Mexico, and then compete that way on a very high demand, lower margin product. So they're different strategies. When we work with our clients today, we really figure out what they know and what they're good at, and a different strategy will apply to a different person based on how advanced they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just a quick warning to everybody before you go jumping ship from China and immediately going to Mexico, do your homework, because not all the products are available down there like you would see in China. And plus some of their infrastructure as far as factories and ramping up production may not be able to meet your needs. Sorry, Lisa, did you have a question? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to make a similar comment to just do your research. Not every product that is able to be produced in China. I mean, they've spent decades, really ramping up their production, improving the quality of their factories, and not all the same raw materials and resources are available in Mexico as they are in China. I mean, everything.
Yeah, it's more industry specific if you think about it, right? So like, they've got a competitive advantage in like wood, for example. Right. They got a lot of wood products. So you might find that, wooden products you could be in Mexico, but if you're looking for like high-end laser micro squishy, then Mexico is probably not your place. I just made a word up.
No, that's perfect. And so people found their product that they're looking to source, and let's say it's still out of China. That seems to be the main spot for them to go get it. Do I hop on a plane, go over to Hong Kong, or go over to China? Like, what's my next move, Brendan, once I kind of figured out where I want to go and what items I want to start importing or bringing in?
Save the flight for at least 6 to 12 months of when you get started. That's not necessary at the beginning. And simply go on Alibaba and you type in whatever. Let's say we just say Dali melting clock or melting clock. And then you'll see a lot of different factories out there, and you send an email to the factories through the system. And I would recommend you do it at least 20 factories, even more, because less than half are going to reply. And you just got to make sure, like, we have a proven template that we use when we send it to the factories. But the main things are going to be what the name of the product is, any alternative names that it could be called. Because sometimes, I used to do pocket bikes, which used to be called monkey bikes. So just be aware some products have a different name to others. The other thing is to make sure that the material it's made out of, is it wood, is it metal? If it's metal, is it tin, is it lead, is it copper? Make sure you're clear on the specifications, size, all the different things that you want. Usually it's going to find something the factory has in stock. Be clear about your color. And most importantly is going to be the MOQ, which is just short for minimum order quantity, right? So you're saying, the factory might say they want 10,000 units, you might want 2,000. So you want to just ask if they can get it for 2,000. And then always say in the template that you will require a sample before you proceed to an order, that you're happy to pay for the sample, so they take you seriously. And then the other thing you'll mention is your port of where you want the goods to go. So you ask them, where is the location? Usually, where is the FOB location? Just that's the terminology of where the goods get picked up and where is it going to go. It's going to go to US, Canada, Australia, Mexico. Be clear on that in your email. And usually, if you cover all those points, the factory know that you're not a beginner. Even though you may be a beginner, but they won't, take advantage of you, or because you don't know what you're doing. If they are a medium to large size factory, they'll reply to you. If they can see you're just, not really organized, and they probably won't take you seriously. And the words you use are very important there because it shows your experience. Use the words FOB or MOQ, then that you're talking the lingo. And the other thing is just to be aware that there are also these things called trading companies out there, which are basically, they look like factories and they smell like factories, but they're not factories. They're middlemen that will just add 100% markup, sometimes more, onto a product that you could get directly. And you just want to watch out for those and not deal with those. In most cases, there are exceptions.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Brendan, is how do you recommend that sellers do their due diligence to be sure they're working with a factory, or if nothing else, a reputable sourcing agent or trade agent, as opposed to somebody who's going to take their money and run?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So there's a few questions there. So let's tell the difference between a factory and a trading company, right? So how do we discern those? So often that will be simply in the company name. So if they're the word trading co, that's a trading company. The other thing is if you look at their product line and they're a jack of all trades and a master of none. So what I mean by that, they may be telling melting clocks, armchairs, chainsaws, window cleaning robots, then that's not a factory. That's I'm happy. That was quite diverse. I'm proud I could come up with that on the spot.
That was pretty good.
There you go. And that's a trading company because they have a bit of everything from different things and they're opportunists. But if they're doing electric leaf blowers, diesel leaf blowers, different bags for collecting leaves and gardening equipment, then that's usually a factory. So jack of all trades, master of none. If and when you do go to a Canton fair or at any trade show, just like straight away, a trading company just smells obvious because of all the different things. The other thing I like to do is ask them, are you a trading company or a factory? Because I find trading companies are much more experienced and have better communication. And I would prefer to deal with a trading company. If you're a trading company, please confirm. And they'll say, yes, we are. And then you go, great, and you delete the email, right? Which begs the question, what if it's a factory and you've now got them to admit they're a trading company and you've lost a potential supplier? And the response is, of course, if they're going to lie to you now about being a trading company when they're a factory, then what's going to happen later when you order? So you've lost nothing in that case. And the last method, of course, is to just do a Google Earth search on them and see where they're located. If they're in the middle of a city, then that's a trading company because that's an office. A factory needs a lot of space. So in the outskirts of a city and it's a larger area, then that's most likely going to be a factory. But probably the easiest way of all is you look at the prices, and if the prices, if there's you send out 20 emails and you get 10 prices, and one of them's way up there, that's usually the trading company because they've got to add the margin. Cool. So then that was the first part of the question. The second part is, how do you know the factory is reputable? There's a way that most people say it, and there's a way that I say it. The way that most people say is you look at their rating, and are they gold supplier or platinum supplier, all those different badges that they get. To me, I don't want to get involved in that, right? I don't want to say like a coach or come help people that's your golden standard. Usually it's pretty simple. The best way to do it is to firstly, there's a 3-step process. You get a sample. If it's a scammer in Nigeria sitting in a cafe in Lagos, then they're not going to be able to send you a sample of your melting alarm clock, right? Maybe 1 out of 100 scammers, right? Then they deserve your money if they've been that diligent. Being facetious there. The other thing is, so once you've got a sample, if the sample's good quality, that's your first sign, right? That's for sure. If you're doing a huge, large order, you can send an inspection team to the factory to check that, like, A, it exists, and B, that like it's got enough, people in there and machines there. That's north of 30, 40, 50K where I'll do that. For 1 to 5,000, you may not want to spend your money on an inspection. And then the next thing, you want to do is have a look through their photos. Are they professional? And how quickly do they respond? Are their responses responding on what you're actually asking for? When you're asking for a hammer, are they giving you a screwdriver? Are they giving you a hammer in terms of what you're asking for? But the best way to do it really is when you pay your balance, when you actually make an order, that you only pay 30%. And then when it's ready, you pay an inspection. And then once it's inspected, then you ship it. So step 1, template or, professional response. Step 2, sample. Step 3, 30% deposit. Step 4, inspection, then balance. And if you do it that way, then that's the best way you're going to do it. The other thing, just to make sure, is that sometimes things can go wrong where someone's reputable and they're intending to do the right thing, but things just go wrong and it's not intentional. And that's probably where most things go wrong. Because you find that, we're dealing with Chinese, they are honorable, just like other countries, but things do go wrong. And where it can go wrong is in standards. So what I like to do is, if there's 2 factories that one's $1.05 and one's $1.25, then everyone goes for $1.05. It's 20 cents cheaper. But if the one that's $1.25 is shipped to your country before, let's say it's America, right? And they do it, every day of the week and twice on Sundays, where the other factories never shipped to America before, then I would just pay a little bit more, because that's how you're going to get it. You're going to have to not worry about customs and standards to the same extent, because the factories had you've got second move advantage, so they've already got the happening. That route, so it's proven. So you're going to have much less trouble getting your goods through. So they're just there you go. That's your waves, safety and reputation and all that. I hope that helped.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Let's actually take a quick break. We're going to hear a message from our sponsor, but when we come back, I want to lean a little bit on Rob's experience sourcing as well, and see maybe if he's got any mishaps that we can learn from. Probably not, but we'll be back in just a second.
Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at GETIDA.com/Sellernomics.
All right, you guys head over to GETIDA.com/Sellernomics for that first 400 and FBA reimbursements free. We are back with Brendan Elias. And Rob, what is maybe something that you wish you knew before you started sourcing that maybe Brendan can help give some new sellers advice on?
Yeah, I think he covered a lot of great bases there. And, I've been to 100 different factories, and trading companies was very big back when I was going over to China and understanding them. But, I do want to slightly go against what Brendan said, only in the sense that sometimes a trading company, if they're reliable and good to get you started, sometimes they can help you get a little lower MOQ, especially when you're just getting started. But eventually you will work to that factory. If it's a successful product, you're going to eventually work to that factory. I remember this one time we actually didn't even know that we weren't dealing with a trading company. We were dealing with a salesperson who represented the actual factory, and they were taking a little bit of a cut because they were kind of like an independent salesperson, which is a little different than a trading company because he worked for that factory. And the way we found out is I was actually there and we were talking to the person, and I asked our guy we're with, the sales, I didn't know it was a sales guy at the time, where the restroom, and he didn't even know where the restroom was in a factory. So there was a red alert right there. But, I think Brendan brought up a lot of good points. Like if factories are asking for more than 30%, I'd be aware, beware of that factory. Shop around, spend some money getting those samples. That seems to be a big thing that I wish I had done. There's two things I wish I did. I got more samples from different factories, even if the prices were a little higher or a little lower, just to really kind of understand the quality. One might be using recycled plastic pellets for an injection mold, where the other one's using brand new plastic pellets. So, quality can change. There's actually, and I learned this as I go, there's two different types of stainless steel. So knowing that the material, like Brendan had mentioned, knowing your material, knowing what you're needing, what you need and what you're looking for, can help and go a long way. So do your homework on the product you're buying to get a good understanding. But quality will definitely, that could really be a factor. So get those inspections done. Brendan, how many times have you seen where somebody orders from China, they skip the inspection because they just trust the factory, or the factory says they did an inspection, and they end up with problems?
I would say that you should pretend that 100% of the time you do an inspection, there'll be a problem. Even though it's about half, just pretend it's 100. Because here's the thing: it's like giving the inmates the keys to the asylum, right? The moment they know there's not going to be an inspection, then they will. Even if your goods were perfect, but the other guy is doing an inspection, and his goods didn't come out right. Well, they're going to give you his goods, and he's going to get good goods because he hasn't. He's going to get inspection. So they will play games where they wouldn't have originally played games if you're not getting inspected. Like that can actually happen, right? As far as inspections are concerned, you just got to be aware that it's usually done by a mandate, right? So the factory you'll send an inspection person, they'll do a day worth of inspection. So if you have like a huge order of 50, 100,000 with 1 million units or something, you might need a couple or 2 or 3 mandates to get a statistically valid sample. Just one thing, I think it might be worthwhile just taking 15 seconds just to explain the pros and cons of a trading company, just so people are aware. So Rob's absolutely right. A lower MOQ, it can be really, really good, right? And that could often happen with a trading company. The negative we've already talked about is price. But one of the things that happens is if it is a trading company and they're buying from a factory, then you're going to find that to get any question answered can sometimes take a week instead of a day, because the factories know. And the other thing is sometimes you won't get a question answered at all. And the other thing I've found is that a trading company can often, the product line might run out. So you might place an order and then go to re-up, and the product's killing it on Amazon or wherever you're selling it. And then you can't get it in peak anymore, or they've stopped making it in stainless steel type 2 or whatever it is. So that's the issue with dealing with those. And the other thing I found is with the dodgy trading companies is they'll take your first order from one factory, and then when you reorder, they will then actually go and supply it themselves from a different factory, give you a low quality, take the same price, and they make the margins in that. That's quite a common little trading company trick. So I just want to bring those to your attention.
No, you're 100% right. And one thing I'm going to mention on that too is sometimes the trading companies are selling things that are kind of end of life. So if it does end up being really good for you, they've already gone on to version 2 or it's made different and you're not going to get the exact same thing anymore. So, that's why you got it at such a good price, is because, the 5,000 or 1,000 or whatever it was you got, that was pretty much it. That's all they had, because that was the end of a line on a run they did.
Right. And what that's the problem, because if you got all your social proof, which is your reviews, based on that thing, and then something else comes and you can't sell that product because the pictures won't match, and then you're gonna kill your listing.
Let's talk a little bit about getting the items from China over to the US. Let's kind of you started to talk about, when you're messaging the factory saying, here's the port I'd like to go out of, here's where I kind of wanted to go into, like the US market. Might even be good if you knew what port it is. Long Beach is one of the biggest ports on the West Coast here where I'm at, besides Oakland, but mainly Long Beach. But let's go over the process a little bit, because some people aren't aware of some of the things that need to be in place when your items start showing up, getting into a port. And then also maybe start a little further back, understanding a full container, half container, and how those affect you, and 40 footers versus smaller, that type of thing.
Okay, there's only 3 ways the goods can get to you: by air, land, or sea. Okay, if we're talking China to America, then straight away land's out, right? It's going to be air or sea. So what's going to happen is you're going to start doing things initially by air, even though the air is more expensive per unit for sure, but you need a certain amount of let's call it economies of scale, a certain amount of units before it ends up becoming more economical by sea, right? So generally your very first one will be, unless it's a bulky product like a motorcycle or something, that will always be by sea. But if you're doing, like, I don't know, let's say you're doing high-end, let's say you're doing something like an AirPod clone or something, right? That will always, you're not going to send that by sea, because it's, size versus value. Like a diamond will always be by air, and a refrigerator will always be by sea. Think of those two, right? Yeah. But when you get to a certain amount, then you're going to do it by sea. So you're going to do it by air initially for a small amount, and that will fly out of wherever the factory will tell you, whether it's Shanghai Airport to America. That that flight takes a day, and then you got 3, 5, 7 days, whatever, for customs clearance. But by your second order, you want to start looking by sea. So in terms of sea, there are 3 types of containers. There's a 20-foot, which is really referring to the height, a 40-foot, and then a 40-foot HQ or HC, high cube. And the HQ is just a little bit bigger than the HC, just because there's different configurations, right? There's another thing, of course, with it, we called LCL, less than cargo load. So what that means is that so you have those 3 container types, right? So you've got a standard airplane container, which you've seen before. You've got the 3 types of shipping containers on the sea, and then what will happen is that you'll determine whether you want a full container or what's called an LCL. An LCL is less than cargo load, LCL, and you might share a 20-foot container with 3 other people who are also, who also want to go to Long Beach, California. And you might take a third, someone else might take a third, another person might take a third. Now, you will pay a little bit more per square foot than the average person, than if you got it themselves, but that can be a good way to do it, right? So you'll usually go from air to an LCL container, whether it be in a 20, 40, or 40 foot. The only variation, of course, is they have these refrigerated containers, which have like refrigerators on the back, actually 2. When I say refrigerators, what I'm talking about, air conditioners as well. But that's if you're doing perishables and seafoods. Like seafood and stuff like that. So they're your container sizes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about when it gets to port? Is there any certain documents or things I need to have in place to get it into, let's say, the US?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a thing called a bill of lading, right? Which is just a fancy word for ownership of the goods. So the person who owns the good has a bill of lading. So the way it used to work in old times was, like, imagine an actual document, and then when it got to port, the document would be held on by a representative of the factory, and then it will be handed to the person who's selling it. Now, with computers and everything, there's a thing called a telex release, where the bill of lading gets passed from one person to the other, and now they're the owner. And simply that happens when you pay for it. So usually when you're beginning with a factory, you will pay for the goods after an inspection, not before, right? When we're paying 30%, getting inspection, then 70%, then the factory will let you sell we'll load it onto the. You get to load onto the ship and you pay for it. But what you could find after 2 or 3 times, you can, if it's a 20-day trip on the plane, and on the sea vessel, then a week before you can pay for the goods to the factory. That gives you another, bit of cash flow for another 10 days or so, and then the factory will release it to you because they've received the money. So you've got to make that payment. You've also got to get an actual inventory listed out of what's in it. Every single box needs to be accounted for. Be careful, because you might have, say, 40 boxes, and then there's 1 box of spare parts. And if the spare parts box isn't labeled spare parts, then that can hold up the whole shipment. So everything that goes in the container, whatever it is, has to be labeled and a value be able to, be attributed to it, right? So that's how we do it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
How do you make the payments on these big shipments? What's the recommendation? Because I seem to remember, I can't remember the name of it now, but wasn't there like a big wire fraud or privacy issue a couple of years ago with making wire transfers in large sums? Forget the name.
Western Union.
Yes, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, look, when a factory asks you to pay by Western Union, we usually do 2 things. The first thing we do is rerun. Do you know what the second thing is, Lisa?
Run faster.
Yeah. And that's not because there's anything wrong with Western Union being a reputable company or anything. It is, but basically its systems are such that someone doesn't even need a bank account. They just need to know the code and they can release it, right? So gullible people can be convinced to give a code. And even if you screw someone over using a bank, well, that bank still has the details of that person. That person can still be fine. And you could call them, if you wanted to, or you felt that you could call them to, a court to talk to face justice, right? So there is, even though people still, do use that method, there is a little bit more protection. So you guys are putting in the link to AtoZ Formula, but what we're going to do is we've got the special event coming up, so we're going to get the team to drop that link for you. To the event. So what I want to share with you is also how we like to do it. So I like to get a big bag of cash and I put in a briefcase and I fly to China and then I give it to the owner of the factory. That's usually how I like to do it. The best way is called a wire transfer, which is basically a bank transfer. Pretty simple. So you just literally call up your bank and it gets done for you. Very, very simple. Usually they'll give you a system where you can actually enter the details after you've done it the first time. So they will usually charge you $20 for a wire, depending. But where you're going to get screwed often is on the exchange rate. Now that's not for you Americans. For Australians or Canadians, when we're paying with our dollars, we will have to worry about that. So I like to use a company called Wise or Airwallex, who give you a really, really good rate. Whereas your bank will always try and take, if it's a local actual bank, they're going to give you the worst rates just because they're full retail and they can get away with it because of their brand name. But if you're American and you're sending to China, well, you're going to send US dollars, so the exchange rate won't matter. So you're just paying a wire fee. So that's never an issue. So a wire is your best way. The other thing that I would love to share with you is that you're only going to be paying 30% upfront, and then the balance at 70%. That's important. So that's how I would do it.
Perfect. Yeah. Brendan, before we kind of shift over to AtoZ Formula, did we probably missed a ton of different things that people could be knowledgeable about sourcing and maybe some safety things, but is there any one thing that maybe we missed that you still want to kind of just mention and get out to people regarding sourcing safely and profitably?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So 3 things. So firstly, bear in mind that you as a beginner, you're going to think that the first thing you're going to do is try and get the best price possible. And that's the obvious thing. And you're going to try and negotiate nickel and dime to get the best price. It's not. Your goal is just to prove the concept. So that means if you have to pay 10, 15, 20% more, that's fine. Remember, your goal is actually to get the lowest MOQ possible. Cash is king. You want to be able to test not just that one product, but 2 or 3 others to make sure they work. So if you eat up all your cash flow on product, even if you get the best deal of the century, and the product doesn't work, you've done your job and you can't test other things. So just bear in mind, MOQ is king in the beginning, right? In my opinion. One way we like to get a good MOQ, I call it the 20-20 rule, which is that we, let's say there's 1,000 units and it's $1 each, right? Or let's say it's 10,000 units and it's $1 each. That's going to cost you $10,000. And let's say you need about, $3 to $4 grand capital you want to spend your goods. Then I'll say to the factory, well, look, here's what, instead of paying $1, I'll pay you $1.20. I'll pay you 20% more, but I can only buy 20% of the quantity. So I will buy 2,000 units at $1.20 as opposed to 10,000 units at $1. And, so then I'll pay 2,400 versus 10,000. Now you might say, but Brendan, now I'm paying $400 more. Yes, but think about the $7,600 that you're going to save in cash. That $400 saves you that extra $7,600. So you have more runway to test things. So that's the 20-20 rule. The other thing is the worst thing you can ever do in Amazon is not have a product that doesn't sell, but a product that does sell and run out of stock. So just be aware of that and make sure that you have enough. So I have another thing. I call it Brendan's supply integrity split strategy. I just made that up years ago. I call it that, where if you have a product that's selling on Amazon and you got to, let's say, first or second position and it runs out of stock, it's going to drop like a stone because Amazon want their commission, their sales velocity. So yes, one way of doing it is to make sure you have enough stock. But what I like to do is that, let's say I have a container coming and I'm going to run out of stock in 2 weeks. And it's going to take 4 weeks to container to get there, or whatever it is. I will take say 20% of the shipment or 30% of the shipment that was going by sea, and I will send that by air, and I'll pay a fortune for that. But it'll arrive, and I can re-up that into Amazon storage. And by the time it's down to like 1098, 7654, third last product, the sea vessel arrives, and now I've re-upped with a sea product. So you can keep that in your pocket if you ever get to the position where you're running out of actual physical stock, and send some by air now and send by sea. That would be one more thing. And the third part is just to realize that my first product didn't work, and that your first product maybe won't work either, and it might even be your second product. But you learn something all the time. And the difference between students of mine who I've coached, who we've worked with and built great results for, is that it's really that you're learning each step of the way. And if you make a mistake, it's a learning experience. And don't, if your first product could knock it out of the park, you could make tens of thousands, 100,000, millions. But if you go with the fact that, like, okay, every time I do something, I'm getting a bit wiser. I'm learning a bit more about ranking keywords and ranking it, getting better images, a bit better about quality control. If you are in that and you're in a learning experience, just understand that all you have to do is get to the point where you're better than most, and then the results will happen. So just don't go in there and expecting. If you expect everything and you have high expectations and you're disappointed, that's going to burn you out. So just be aware that the mindset is what really separates someone who's a good sourcing and Amazon seller from someone who just, is chasing the shiny object.
Yeah, absolutely. Brendan, where can folks learn more about AtoZ Formula and get in touch with you if they have any questions?
So we have that link, which I think Kathy's given to you there's atozformula.com/GETIDA. And what we have is we have a free ticket to, we have a 2-day event. We run them several times a year. By the time you watch this, you may have missed the one that's coming up. It doesn't matter. We run them several times a year. So just register for the next one. We charge $2,997 for the tickets. We've run these for 14 years. It's the best sourcing event, one of the best marketing events out there. But because of our friendship and partnership with GETIDA, it's yours free. You can bring a friend for at least while this link is up, and come and enjoy it. But just be prepared. It's 2 days. It's Saturday and Sunday from it's always kicks off at 11 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. PST. 2 full days Saturday and Sunday. Be there. Take a lot of notes. We don't pitch or sell anything that at the event. There is like further things if you want it, but there's nothing to buy there. If you're worried about that, don't. Just come enjoy it. A lot of people say it's one of the best 2-day events they've ever attended. And you'll see me, yours truly there. And I also have 8 guest speakers, some of who I pay top dollar to help you. So if you found some of this useful, you get more of that plus a lot more at the event. And say thanks to GETIDA and Rob, Lisa, and Yoni for hooking that up for you, because that's not something I do for just anyone. And you can have a lot of fun there if you've had fun today. So there you go, guys. Thanks for letting me share with you our awesome event and share with you this information for the last half hour or so.
Of course. And for the audio listeners, I'll put it back up on the screen. But for audio listeners, that URL is A2Z, but it's ATOZ formula.com/GETIDA. And you can learn more about A to Z Formula at atozformula.com. Perfect. Brendan, thank you so much for hopping on with us today. Absolutely excited about the event in December. Like you said, they happen frequently, and that's a very generous offer. So we really appreciate you extending that to our listeners.
Perfect. It's been awesome. Rob, I've seen you in so many countries, and I think once we hit Antarctica, we've hit every continent. So let's plan a trip to Antarctica at some point.
Getting close.
Pleasure to meet you.
Awesome.
Incredible.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brendan. And thank you so much for everybody who listened today. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts with us in the comments, subscribe to the show, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Sellernomics Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsor, GETIDA. Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at GETIDA.com/Sellernomics. Be sure to join us again next week for more great tips on how to grow your business. And thanks again for listening.